part. That's the precursor. By the time we're into the Cambrian, though, things had started to certainly heat up. And for one thing, we see the Great Cambrian explosion of animals with skeletons. And I think here the effect is so pervasive that we may forget that here is a wonderful possible link to predation. Why did organisms suddenly develop skeletons? Everything from trilobites to mollusks, brachiopods, echinoderms, within just 10 million years. Maybe because there were also at this time developing larger animals, some up to a meter long, that could prey upon these, that were for the first time taking advantage of the nutrition provided by other animals. And here you can see just a little range chart. Don't worry too much. This is a worm. This is a kind of crustacean. And these amazing animals called anomalocarids, which are amongst the first big predators. And they're kind of interesting looking animals. We're not even yet sure exactly what they were. But they clearly did a number on some other organisms, or it certainly seems so. They had large eyes, they had these large appendages, and they weren't the only predators around, but they were probably the biggest ones. And you can see some potential prey, these goofy little guys called hallucigenia, based on the notion of perhaps the finder of these. Sometimes people say eureka when they find something new. Maybe Conway Morris said, I must be hallucinating when he found this thing because it has spikes on its back. And originally it was reconstructed even upside down. But it does serve to illustrate that organisms were starting to get a little bit spiny, a little bit defensive at this time. And it may well be that organisms like Anomalocaris had a lot to do with this. Now, Anomalocaris, we know what its business end was. It's this sort of pineapple sliced thing, which at one time was given a separate name even, while Anomalocaris was actually named for these strange great appendages. It was an arthropod-like animal, certainly, and it may be a cousin or a sister group to arthropods. Had somewhat segmented body, but that pineapple slicer actually was more like the aperture of a camera with a series of little plates that could be drawn in together to literally slice into prey. And here's a reconstruction of Anomalocaris. They were up to about a meter long, perhaps the biggest ones, and active swimming animals with good eyes. Eyesight seems to go along with these complex interactions. Cydia, named after Walcott's son, was a possible crustacean, also perhaps a predator of Cambrian seas. And we know about these because we have very well-preserved fossils from the Cambrian in some places, better than at later time. We know that trilobites were serving as prey there. My colleague at one-time student, Lauren Babcock, now at Ohio State, showed that a lot of Cambrian trilobites, and some later trilobites too, tend to have crescentic-shaped bite marks on them. One of the remarkable things that Lauren discovered is that these bite marks tend to occur rather consistently positioned. At least a large majority of them are in the lower right part of the trilobites, which either means that the prey was going after that part specifically, and that the prey was, I guess, left-handed. I don't know, I like to think so because I'm sinistral. But anyway, had a handedness to its way. Or maybe it means that when they attacked from other directions, they were wholeheartedly successful, so we don't see the record of those. But in either case, there is what we call a stereotyping of the predator behavior already in the Cambrian. That's quite interesting. So it shows complex interactions. By the time we're up into the rocks that are very familiar to us here, the Ordovician and Silurian, that starts somewhere a little after 500 million years ago. The boundary now put around 443 and going up to 417. This block of time, we're really seeing the diversification of invertebrate predators. Here again, borrowing from that lovely painting by Agnew, you see this a nice guy, the cephalopod, but you see a number of others showing up in the great diversification of the Ordovician period. And I've just blocked it in. And some of the different things, the nautiloids coming in there, phyllocarids, and others. And I'll just quickly show you some. Trilobites themselves, we know they were prey, but were they also predators? They don't have much in the way of mouth parts, just a little shield-shaped structure with sometimes with prongs on it, sometimes hinged, sometimes firmly fixed to the underside of the head. They're looking at the inside of this trilobite. That's called the hypostome. And the hypostome may have helped in some way to scrape things up off the bottom. If so, they were probably soft-bodied predators. That is, their prey was soft-bodied. And they also had a series of legs, and those legs, like the inner parts of the legs of horseshoe crabs, may have been used to help crunch and move prey up to the mouth. A remarkable thing also found in part by my colleague here, Dave Meyer, and Danita Brandt, formerly a student at Cincinnati, was evidence that trilobites could be predators, found at Bald Knob and other places around Cincinnati. Here you can see our lovely Isotylus. State fossil is an Isotylus. And this is a trilobite that can be quite large. I mean, some of them literally, as you know, probably can be over 2 feet long. And you also find Rusophycus, which is the name for the trace fossil made by trilobites. This particular large Rusophycus seems to go with the Isotylus. You can even see the marks of its genal spines. And one of the neat things about this, and it's not just an isolated specimen, these have been found from Cambrian times onward up at least into Devonian, are specimens like this that may show interception of a burrow. Here you can see the trilobite. You also see a worm burrow coming in there and ending sort of in the trilobite, maybe about where its hypostome was. This is an interesting possibility that might suggest they really were soft-bodied predator, or went after soft-bodied prey. There are other things around, although there are no fish in our local seas. There were eurypterids, chelicerates, relatives of modern scorpions and spiders, and horseshoe crabs. And this is Megalograptus, which is a local eurypterid, fairly good-sized animal, could be, with these very interesting brushy appendages that it may have been using to seize and capture prey and push them down again into these inner parts of the legs for tearing apart. And by Silurian, there were the largest predatory arthropods that have ever lived. In fact, the largest arthropods. Here you can see one with a, I don't know where they got that guy. I mean, he looks like an alien, but so you wouldn't necessarily know his height, I guess. But in any case, this is the wonderful Pterygotus, which was a giant arthropod that lived in marginal seas in the Silurian period. And it had some pretty formidable claws with these spikes on them. You can see them up here. These second appendages, which could have been used certainly for seizing prey. And it may be one of the reasons that fishes that lived in these marginal marine environments, not here in the Cincinnati perhaps, but around the margins of the seas, were heavily armored, because they may have been attacked by things like this. There are less impressive-looking arthropods like philiparids, leaf shrimp, which don't look like they could do much damage, but actually have crushing, almost molar-looking gastric or stomach teeth that could tear into or break apart hard-shelled prey. They still live today. Here's a nice depiction of a modern one. Here's an ancient one. I don't know if it's got a scale on that, but that would be, maybe up to about 1 foot long. Here you can see one right next to a starfish. These were predators from the Cambrian, still around, but they don't do much damage today. And of course, I already mentioned that the sea without fish nonetheless had shellfish like big nautiloids, which, based on their modern counterparts, Nautilus, probably had well-developed eyes, or fairly well-developed eyes. Actually, Nautilus eyes not great compared to an octopus, but it's still a pinhole camera and can see some things. And tentacles, whether they had suckers, we don't really know. Nautilus doesn't. But here you can see one going after our state fossil Isotylus in an old museum display. These things were no doubt capable of swimming. Modern ones swim with jet propulsion using this little hose here. And they were active predators, therefore. They can seize with their tentacles. And they also, as shown here from a modern Nautilus, have beaks. There are a few cases, not from around here, of fossil nautiloid beaks, or beaks that may go with them, called wrinkleites. And these beaks are like those of a parrot for pretty good tearing into prey. The innocuous-looking gastropods may have also been predators, or parasites, or both. And here you can see a very important family called the Platyceratidae. You know, Steve Felton is here today, and one of his favorite of all organisms is Cyclonema, Natochenema, and Platycerus, or other ones. Here's a nice spiny one from the Devonian. These are interesting looking snails. They're quite well preserved because their shell mineralogy is different from most snails. It's calcite. And we have a great record of them. One of their interesting habits that most of you probably know is that many of them seem to have been coprophagous. That is, they fed on fecal material from host animals. And we find them as close by as Corryville and probably closer by in rocks of the Cincinnatian, attached to crinoids up near where their anal vent would be, where they would presumably excuse me, get food from their host without damaging the host. I should have pointed out, but the +0 interaction